My name is Maureen Murdock, and I'm a psychotherapist and a teacher. I think what you're most interested in is a book that I wrote 30 years ago called The Heroine's Journey. The Hero's Journey was written by Joseph Campbell. The book that he wrote was The Hero with a Thousand Faces, in which he was looking at the archetypal or psychological journey, primarily of the hero or of the masculine. Well, I had read his book, and I started to work with him. I was a psychotherapist working in a practice in Venice and in Santa Monica, and it didn't feel to me like his structure really addressed the issues that the women that I was working with were dealing with, particularly looking at how to heal the deep wounding of the feminine nature, both on an individual and cultural level. I developed the map or the structure of the heroine's journey to really look at how women have been separated from their own nature, in a sense, because we live in such a masculine defined culture. The 70s and 80s was the second wave of the women's movement, and so we were all talking about these issues, and I happened to be a writer and put it down in a book. and the book touched a nerve for a lot of women. You know, they saw themselves in the book. Since I'm a writer, I'm always thinking in terms of women getting their voices published. I get the New York Times every day, and I'm noticing that more and more women are writing in the opinion section, and I think that's really important for women to answer the letters to the editor, and to be writing essays and getting them published online or in magazines or in papers, because that wasn't true 30 years ago. Women's ideas and women's feelings, particularly about why we are sequestered right now. I mean, I feel like we're all being asked to look at that. Like, are we focused too much on consumerism? Are we focused too much on not taking care of the planet? And this time inside is making us look at what being so busy out in the world is doing to our planet. So I think the more women talk about this and write about this and write about their own feelings, is really important. I think we have to validate each other. I wrote this book from the perspective of a father's daughter and from the perspective of fathers' daughters in general. So the separation from the feminine comes from a disidentification with the feminine, you know, not wanting to be like the mother. Now, again, I wrote this 30 years ago when women were not out in the world as much, you know, working in the world. So a lot of daughters didn't want to identify with their mothers. They wanted to identify with their fathers so that they could have power or agency out in the world. But no, all women don't separate from the feminine. You know, a lot of, probably more of your generation are more connected to the feminine, more connected to your feelings and to your creativity. If we identify the word feminine as a connection to feelings, or a connection to creativity, or a connection to the body, or a connection to spirituality. Yes, a lot of girls do separate that when they become very focused on the intellect. I think maybe the greatest separation has to do with not being well connected to our own bodies and our own sexuality. I think that we relate so strongly to Mother Earth. You know, I think because of our menstrual cycles, we're more attuned to the phases of the moon and to the equinoxes and the solstices and the rituals of the earth. And because the earth is always giving birth and then showing us death, you know, we see that cycle of birth and death. And the ancient matristic or matrifocal cultures celebrated the earth in terms of her birthing and death cycle and rebirth cycle. So I think it's in our DNA. I want to hear more and more of women's stories, and for women to take their lives seriously, to realize the value that we all have, instead of looking outside of ourselves at the success that perhaps the masculine culture has shown us.
It's that makes me want to cry.
Why does it make you cry?
I just have had such a hard time. Like, I know that I have worked really hard at some stuff, but it's like sometimes it's like hard to like own it.
Women still get short shrift, meaning they don't get the types of attention that we should be giving each other. So you have got to validate your voice. We don't really take the time to give women an opportunity to speak and to show their work.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about like we have to validate each other is really.
Yeah. One thing I've written about and I've learned is women don't know how to brag.
Right, yeah. It's true.
Yeah. So it's like we need bragging practice, you know.
Right.
And maybe doing it with each other, you know, so that like you could say, wow, today I did an interview with an author whose work I've been really interested in, and I set it up, and you know, and so that your friend or me can say, yeah, that was gutsy.